Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here coming at you with another video. Welcome back to Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, and today I'm going to be bringing you my first iteration of the Gunlance guide. And the reason I'm saying that this is the first iteration is because the data that I am using to reach the conclusions that I tell you throughout this guide is basically data collected in a bubble. It's basically me playing and testing out the game because I was lucky enough to be granted early access by Capcom, and therefore, you know, it's a very small set of data, and as the game becomes available to more and more players, then it's natural that some player might come up with, oh, there's actually a different strategy that is better than the stuff that Rurikhan is saying, to which point I'll be like, oh, you know what, you're right, you know, let's test that stuff out, let's see what's going on. It's easier to reach a consensus on what is best when there are more people testing out this stuff, and I always want to keep an open mind to that, so don't take this as the ultimate end-all be-all, kind of like what I did for Rise, which even then, I kind of feel like that one should not have been the ultimate, even though I think that most of the stuff that I said in that guide, I think still holds true today. Speaking of older guides, this guide does not make the older guide invalid. I'm not going to be going over the basics of Gunlance, like how do you get into a slam, and how do you do a full burst combo, what is wide sweep, how do you get to Wyrmstake, because I've done all that and it would just be a waste of like 50 minutes to explain all that stuff again. So that guide is still very much valid, and in this guide I'm going to be focusing on some of the changes that we've gotten to some of our skills, as well as the new switch skills that we are getting, and what I would consider to be some of the best combos to use in Sunbreak. So again, if you're looking to really master the weapon and you've never played Gunlance before, you might want to check out the base Rise guide first. Also, the controller nomenclature that I'm going to be using throughout this guide and every future guide that I put up on the channel is going to be PlayStation. I'm sorry for everybody that plays on keyboard. It's like, look, I'm an old man, and the first time I looked at the keybind settings in Rise, I almost had an aneurysm, so I decided, okay, I'm not actually going to try to figure that stuff out. I leave that to better minds than mine, so you'll have to figure out the controls for yourself if you're using mouse and keyboard. I'm very, very sorry. I wish I had the time to dedicate to all that, but I don't. Now, the reason I'm using PlayStation nomenclature is because naturally the Xbox One controller and Xbox 360 controllers use different faceplate button positioning from the Nintendo Switch. So if I start talking about X and Y, people are going to be wondering, okay, is that the Switch X and Y, the Xbox X and Y? If I just use PlayStation and I say triangle, everybody knows, okay, it's the top faceplate button. If I say circle, everybody knows it's the right faceplate button, and I will put a very quick display of the controllers. You can pause the video and check out what the layouts are for all of these, and hopefully that will make things a little bit easier for everybody to understand. And now that I've gotten all of those boring things out of the way, let's actually start talking about Gunlance in Sunbreak, because it is looking pretty damn good. So starting things off, I want to talk about the different shelling styles. So first, naturally, you have normal. Normal is pretty much the same as it's always been in Monster Hunter games. The advantage of normal is that you get more full burst damage, not only because you have more shells than the other shelling styles, but also because you have a damage modifier whenever you perform a full burst, which in this game I believe that modifier is probably about 5%, but don't quote me on that, because whenever it comes to damage calculations in Monster Hunter, I kind of suck at it, because you have to think about, oh, there's the hit zone value, then there's the elemental resistance, because a percentage of shelling damage is actually fire. So don't quote me on that, that's what I think, but I could be wrong. Just know that there's a damage modifier whenever you do full burst, and that damage modifier also gets applied whenever you do bullet barrage, which is pretty cool. So for my interpretation, a majority of your playstyle whenever it comes to playing normal is going to be performing bullet barrage and then doing full bursts, and sometimes popping the occasional ground splitter depending on the monster that you are fighting. Then we get on to wide shelling. Now, wide shelling, the advantage of that one is going to be most damage per individual shell, but naturally you have less shells than the other playstyles, and on top of it, if you try doing full burst with wide, you actually get a negative damage modifier to your shells, and that negative damage modifier also gets applied whenever you do bullet barrage. Now naturally, wide, just like in Rise, has the best charge shells in the business. It's going to get the most damage out of charge shells of any Gunlance, but that's not really saying much, because I feel that very much like in Rise, charged shells are just not a particularly good playstyle. Now, I could be wrong, but me and CaosSlayer, we talked about this back in Rise. Focus still does not seem to affect charged shells all that much. You know, it does affect them, but it's such a minor thing that you can barely notice it. And on top of it, the damage that charged shells deal does not seem to justify the effort that you have to do in order to get off a charged shell, particularly when it comes to Master Rank, where monsters are moving much, much faster. And interestingly enough, despite the negative modifier on the full burst portion of Bullet Barrage is still like the fastest damage that I was able to get out of white shelling, which is interesting. But obviously white shelling playstyle is also going to be consisting of poke shell poke or shell shell poke shell, you know, just like doing those types of playstyles. I actually think that wide has a lot of potential, and I wasn't able to test everything because I haven't unlocked all of the Gunlances yet, but I think that wide might actually have a lot of potential for elemental playstyles. What I mean this is by the elemental damage of poke, coupled together with the additional benefits from Erupting Cannon, which increases melee damage, which is a playstyle that I kind of want to explore on my second playthrough of the game that I'm going to be doing on Switch. And I think that that is going to be where wide is really going to shine, by pumping out a bunch of melee damage coupled together with some shells. Obviously, the other thing that you guys are probably aware if you've played Rise is that the Wyrmstake of wide also has a stunning component to it, which is pretty cool, and this includes if you do Bullet Barrage with the regular Wyrmstake, then that is going to do stunning damage if you're able to land the Bullet Barrage in the head, which is going to be somewhat challenging. So my prediction for the wide playstyle is going to be, again, like I said, poke shell poke, shell shell poke, that type of stuff, coupled together with Bullet Barrage whenever possible, right? And then we have the long shelling style, which in my opinion is going to be the more meta play style. Again, like I said, this is just my prediction, and the reasoning behind that is because Bullet Barrage is one of the biggest damage dealing skill that we've ever had in the Gunlance as far as I'm concerned. And Bullet Barrage takes a lot of advantage of Wyvern Fire damage, with long shelling dealing the most Wyvern Fire damage of all the other playstyles. It's not surprising that long basically comes out on top, because long deals more Wyvern Fire damage by default, deals more regular Wyrmstake damage by default. You put those two things together, and when you shell the monster, it is going to hurt a lot, and it is going to deal the most damage out of all of the other shelling playstyles. On top of it, long also has longer range on its shells, which makes it a more versatile shelling style, because with monsters moving a whole lot faster when it comes to Master Rank, you know, you might just be a little bit out of range. Those long shells are still going to land, whereas normal and wide might actually miss. So, you know, I kind of feel like long is going to be one of the best playstyles, which, to me, I also use long throughout most of Rise, even though normal, I kind of feel like, particularly with the Raknakadaki Gunlance, was a little bit better. Because you could get more damage out of it. It was just a really powerful Gunlance, had Wyvern Exploit, all of that stuff. But in Sunbreak, you're actually going to be able to get those benefits through Rampage decorations, which in my opinion makes long a much more attractive playstyle, but that is just my opinion currently. Maybe I will be persuaded otherwise as more players gain access to the game, like I've mentioned. So let's actually get into the different switch skills and see how things are going to be switching up for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. And we're going to be starting by the reloads. I think that these are still fairly basic. You got your quick reload versus your guard reload. In my opinion, if you're playing long or normal, you're going to be wanting to use quick reload most of the time. The exception there is if you are playing long and you are trying to do like Wyrmstake spam playstyle, then you might want to keep guard reload, and that's one of the advantages, right? Like with the switch skill swap system, you're actually going to be able to just have, okay, on one I'll have quick reload so that I can do full burst and stuff like that, and on the other one I'm going to have guard reload in case I feel like actually switching it up and going for charged shells into the Wyrmstake spam. So it actually supports both playstyles. So if you're someone that really enjoyed it, now you can just do both playstyles in the same loadout, which is actually really cool. But obviously, in my opinion, guard reload really shines whenever it comes to playing as wide shelling, so that you can continuously go poke shell, poke shell, poke shell, guard, poke shell, poke shell, poke shell, guard. And it usually lines up pretty well with most monsters' movesets. You can, you know, do a guard midway through your combo, and it's just very good for keeping that aggressive playstyle of wide shelling on top of the monsters. That is going to be most of the cases where I'll be using guard reload. But like I said, if you want to do, the Wyrmstake spam playstyle, you can do that as well, and that is what guard reload is there for. Always remember that one of the big advantages of quick reload is that it combos into slam just by pressing triangle and circle. After you do a quick reload, it goes into slam, and that is like one of its biggest benefits. Now let's talk about Wyrmstake cannon versus Erupting cannon. This is very much a choice that you are going to have to make. Now when it comes to using bullet barrage, if you want to get the most damage possible, you're going to want to have the Wyrmstake cannon in there. And that is because the Wyrmstake cannon just straight up does more damage. The difference is the Erupting cannon is going to give you a buff that is going to increase your damage. And it is definitely a buff. It does not seem to me like they actually lowered the damage of Gunlance. But again, like I said, I'm not particularly good at testing this stuff, so don't take my word for it. But it definitely just feels like, okay, it's just a flat buff. You now deal more melee damage. I actually felt like pokes dealt significantly more damage in Master Rank. Could just be due to the fact that, you know, I was using gun lances with more raw damage, but I was able to chop tails a lot more easily than I was able to during Rise. So yeah, I just kind of feel like the gun lance is just packing more of a punch there, and Erupting cannon is really good. Another really good thing about Erupting cannon is the recovery and the execution. See, where Wyrmstake cannon is really slow, as we all know, like if you're doing the, you know, the wide sweep combo and you're trying to combo that into a Wyrmstake cannon, it takes like 10 years for the Wyrmstake cannon to come out. Erupting cannon is like just a quick slap. Like it just goes off, bam! So if you're trying to go for a faster playstyle, Erupting cannon is actually really, really good. And not just that, but Erupting cannon combos really fast. So it recovers super fast and allows you to just like instantly combo into another move. So if you want to, you can do Erupting cannon immediately afterwards. You can do like an advancing thrust, or you can do Erupting cannon and immediately afterwards you can shell. One of the things that I used to do quite a lot as I was advancing through Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, because you don't get bullet barrage right off the bat, I would go into, I actually just used mostly Erupting cannon. I barely ever used Wyrmstake. I would use Erupting cannon, and then after Erupting cannon, I would instantly pop a shell, because you can shell really fast after Erupting cannon. You guys have no idea. And then immediately after that shell, I would just go ahead and go into a quick reload into a slam. And it was just a really cool playstyle, because you're doing the slam, taking advantage of the Erupting cannon melee damage buff, and you're just being way faster than Wyrmstake cannon, which would take a long time to both place and recover, and you're just already going into your combos and going into shell and going into wide sweep and all of that. So it's just a really, really good ability. My recommendation when it comes to Wyrmstake cannon and Erupting cannon is to have one on each of your sets, potentially having even Erupting cannon bundled together with Ground Splitter, because if you're going for Erupting cannon, usually means that you want like a bit of a faster playstyle. So having Ground Splitter there kind of promotes that faster playstyle, because it's much faster than popping off bullet barrages, particularly if you have a smaller target. So that is my recommendation. I will show you guys like the stuff that I'm running at the end of this video. But, you know, again, this is going to be very much a personal choice. Just keep in mind, Wyrmstake cannon, slower, more damage. Erupting cannon buffs your melee damage for like 30 seconds or however long it is, and is also super fast when compared to Wyrmstake. Like, you guys have no idea. Erupting cannon, way, way, way faster, and it feels really good to pull off. Then we have the three big ones, which is Bullet Barrage, Hail Cutter, and Ground Splitter. And let's just get Hail Cutter out of the way, because I know that a lot of people are going to be curious about Hail Cutter. Hey, Rurikhan, is Hail Cutter any good? Is it fantastic now? And it's like, yeah, they buffed Hail Cutter, but in my opinion, it's still not that great, particularly when it eats up 2 wire bugs. And I know that they recover way faster than the wire bugs from Bullet Barrage, but Hail Cutter still doesn't do nearly enough damage to justify, for starters, the animation commitment that you have with Hail Cutter if you're doing it from the ground. If you're doing it from the air, I can see kind of like a couple of use cases here and there if you're really focusing on doing aerial Gunlance, but even then, is like just from a pure performance standpoint, I feel like the Hail Cutter is not a particularly good skill. And this is with me testing it. Like, to give you guys an idea, I actually made like a set that was all about having a critical boost, a maximum attack boost, weakness exploit, expert, all of that stuff, and no shelling skills, no load up, no nothing. And I went in there and I was like, okay, let's do a Hail Cutter. And I did the Hail Cutter. And then I did a bullet barrage, and again, keep in mind, this is a bullet barrage without artillery, without load shells, with no damage bonus whatsoever, and the bullet barrage still beat Hail Cutter by a large margin. So in my opinion, Hail Cutter is not particularly good unless you want to have the fast bullet barrage. And you guys are like, what the hell is the fast bullet barrage? So let's talk about bullet barrage in order to get into that. So bullet barrage is a skill that has 2 speeds to it. Actually, it has multiple speeds to it depending on the reload status of your gun lance. But the idea is it basically reloads the entirety of your gun lance. That means if you're missing a shell, it is going to do a reload animation, but it's going to be considerably faster. If you're missing like 5 shells, it's going to do a reload animation. It's still going to be somewhat fast, but it's going to be slower than the one previous, right? If you are missing your Wyvern Fire, it's probably going to be the longest reload you can imagine. Now, the cool thing about Bullet Barrage is that while you're doing this reload, the game gives you hyper armor and a bunch of damage reduction, which is really, really good. This makes the move amazing to use during roars and stuff like that, right? Now, the thing about it is, if you have everything charged up and your Wyvern Fire is not on cooldown, the move is instant. It just goes like, you instantly jump forward, you unload the barrage, and boom, Bob's your uncle, right? So that could be like a potential use case for Hail Cutter, where you're basically using the cooldown reduction for Wyvern Fire in order to achieve fast bullet barrages. That's kind of like one of the use cases that I can see for it, but even then, is like, it still uses 2 wire bugs. These are 2 wire bugs you could be using to just pop off another bullet barrage. I don't think Hail Cutter is particularly useful. I'll be very curious to see how the community deals with Hail Cutter, if there's anybody that's actually going to find a use for it somehow. You know, because I'm open to the idea. Sure, show me what it can do. But personally, I've tested it, and I'm just like, I wouldn't use it. But, you know, you guys do you. And then we have Ground Splitter. Now, some of you guys might be thinking, okay, so we do Ground Splitter, and then we do Bullet Barrage, right? And no, that's actually not the idea. Because I've done some rudimentary testing with doing Ground Splitter into Bullet Barrage and just doing Bullet Barrage and just doing Bullet Barrage 1. Just straight up. Like, you're talking straight target dummy, obviously, assuming that you can land every Bullet Barrage, which you guys might be like, what do you mean if you can land? I mean, landing Bullet Barrage can't be that hard. Yeah, tell me that when you go fight like an Azuros or something like small. That tends to move a whole lot, particularly when you get to the end game system of the game. You're going to find that sometimes landing Bullet Barrage is not the easiest thing in the world. But this is a very good thing, in my opinion. I might do a video talking specifically about that, but this is a very good thing because it makes it a high-risk, high-reward maneuver. You actually need some mastery of it in order to land the attacks, not just like, oh, I hit the button, big numbers come out. It's like, no, it takes some planning in order for you to actually land these bullet barrages in smaller monsters. Sometimes you might overshoot them. You know, there's going to be a lot of times you're going to be missing bullet barrages, and I think that is a good thing because that is a way to balance this skill. Requires additional skill in order to really pull off the good stuff. So then you guys wonder, well, when is Ground Splitter going to be useful? And in my opinion, I personally, in my setup, I run Bullet Barrage in my main setup, and then on my blue thing, I have the Ground Splitter. The reasoning behind that is sometimes a monster is a little bit too hyper, which makes it very hard to predict where he's going to be when you're about to pop your Bullet Barrage, but you might still have wire bugs available, and in those situations, I find Ground Splitter to be a little bit more valuable. And the added benefit is, if at some point during your Ground Splitter moves, you actually, you know, get a down on the monster or something, you can always just swap, go into Bullet Barrage, and your Bullet Barrage is going to deal more damage. Because at the end of the day, when you are going out and fighting monsters, it's not like the training dummy. They're not just standing there waiting for you to unload on them. They're going to be moving. And the mobility that Ground Splitter gives you, and the fact that it's got hyper armor built in as well, still makes it a very powerful skill, unlike Hail Cutter, where you press the buttons and, you know, you see a one big damage number, maybe, if you're lucky, if you invested a whole bunch in, you know, actual raw damage skills. And even then, it's like, what are you going to do after it? Full burst? Oh, man, it's such a good skill. So it's like, in my opinion, Bullet Barrage and Ground Splitter are kind of your bread and butter. And I would say this for pretty much every playstyle. Normal, wide, and long, I would use Ground Splitter still. And here's the thing, when you watch my first playthrough, you'll notice that I actually don't use Ground Splitter after I get Bullet Barrage. I just start going Bullet Barrage all the way every day. But near the end, I started using it again because, like I said, monsters get a little bit more challenging, and you'll appreciate the mobility that you get from Ground Splitter and having that as an option. Now let's talk about the other two skills, which are Reverse Blast versus Guard's Edge. So Reverse Blast is obviously the new skill. I was actually pretty excited about this one because it is kind of like a thing that you can shoot towards the monster with your shield and shield slam them, which is kind of like something that I specifically requested in some of my videos. Dude, I just want to shield bash monsters with Blast Dash. I think that'd be amazing. Turns out the implementation, I was like, I don't know about that. The damage is not fantastic. Even if you put a bunch of damage skills into it, it just doesn't appear to have that much motion value from as far as I can tell. Naturally, you can stun monsters with it, but even still, I just found it to be, it's a niche skill. It's interesting to use. But I think you'll get much more value out of Guard's Edge, because Guard's Edge is the parry move that also recovers your sharpness. Now, having said that, there are situations where Reverse Blast will be better than Guard's Edge, because Reverse Blast, like the name implies, actually shoots you backwards. You actually have to position in a weird... You have to kind of like do the what do people call it? The Korean backdash, whatever, the Korean back hop. But you have to do that if you want to actually aim this towards the monster. So you have to pull your stick direction away from the monster and then pop Reverse Blast in order to get the shield bash on the monster if you want to use it offensively. But by default, it does go in a reverse, and I think it even gives you a couple of invisibility frames. So the thing here is sometimes monsters will come at you with attacks. They'll hit you multiple times. And, you'll Guard's Edge the first one, get hit by the second one, or maybe you'll block the first one, then Guard's Edge the second one. The idea is, and in the words of Miyagi from Karate Kid, the best way to, the best defense is no be there, right? It's just so that's essentially what Reverse Blast allows you to do. You're just not going to be there. And on top of it, you're going to shell the monster on the way out. So it's a cool defensive move. It definitely has its uses. And on top of it, this can be used for you to get off an aerial burst. So keep that in mind. Like if you go and you have like on your secondary loadout, for instance, you put Reverse Blast and charged shells, you can do a Reverse Blast, bash the monster with your shield, then shell in the air, and then do a full burst. As a matter of fact, you can even do a full burst if you wait long enough. There's a little bit of timing to it. But yeah, you can use it to do the aerial burst thing, which is pretty cool. It's a really neat thing to do. But ultimately, it is extremely niche. But then again, considering the way that the game is going to be played in Sunbreak, and the way that I've been playing the game in Sunbreak, I don't even give Guard's Edge that much value either anymore. You guys are like, wait, what? What do you mean you don't give Guard's Edge that much value? Guard's Edge is awesome. You're 1000% correct. Guard's Edge is indeed awesome. You know it's even more awesome? Bullet Barrage. Bullet Barrage does ridiculous amounts of damage. You guys are like, well, yeah, but Guard's Edge is a defensive move. Exactly, but there's a much better defensive move in Sunbreak, and that is the Redirection skill. And see, this is exactly where I'm coming from when I'm saying that when more players get access to the game, they're going to think up more creative stuff. So, for instance, while I was, going through the game and playing through stuff, CaosSlayer was busy, like, breaking down every single video that was coming out of, like, Twitter and all of that stuff. And he was analyzing how Redirection actually worked. And I saw a CaosSlayer video because I hadn't realized that Redirection also recovers your wire bugs. I just thought it was like a Valor Dodge type thing. I didn't even consider the wire bug recovery, but it does. And that makes Redirection a much better skill, in my opinion, than Guard's Edge. Why? Because basically, if you master Redirection, which in my opinion is a little bit harder to master than Guard's Edge, but if you master Redirection, which basically the idea is you switch skill swap when you are about to get hit, the game is going to give you a Valor Dodge and recover wire bugs, which then allows you to use Bullet Barrage more often. As opposed to Guard's Edge, which is going to consume a wire bug, which slows down when you can use Bullet Barrage. It recovers a little bit of the sharpness of your weapon, which is whatever. But, Redirection just feels like a much better thing to master. If you want to master like a defensive option, I would think that Redirection is the way to go. But that's just my opinion when it comes to that stuff. You know, different people are going to have different opinions as players come through and they check stuff out. They're going to be thinking about different ways of doing it. But this is the way that I look at it. In terms of skills, in terms of armor skills, which skills do I suggest for all you Gunlance wielding hunters out there? Definitely, artillery is your most important skill. That is going to just straight up increase your damage. Like I said, the most damaging skill the Gunlance has is Bullet Barrage. The most efficient way to deal as much damage as humanly possible is to spam Bullet Barrage as much as you possibly can. Therefore, artillery is the most important thing. Second, load shells. More damage. This is like pretty much a no-brainer. Third, evade extender. Once again, the old Miyagi concept, no be there. Or not even just no be there, but it also allows you to move towards the monsters more offensively. So it is not a defensive skill, as a lot of people consider it. It is both an offensive and defensive skill. So it's not just about defense. It also allows you to close the gap on monsters faster and keep your uptime into the monster. So I consider that to be extremely important. Fourth, Wire Bug Whisperer. This, I feel like, is going to be very important because, like I said, one of our biggest damage-dealing abilities is Bullet Barrage. Wirebug Whisperer is going to recover those wire bugs faster. Redirection. I put these kind of like in the same thing, Wirebug Whisperer and Redirection. Once again, I think that Redirection might even be more important than Wirebug Whisperer. I think that if you have to choose, okay, Rurikhan, I can only have one of these two skills. Redirection. Go max Redirection, because, you know, you're going to get a defensive option, and on top of it, it's going to recover your wire bugs as well. But Wirebug Whisper and Redirection, super important to keep Bullet Barrage uptime. Sharpness management, like Razor Sharp and Protective Polish. So it seems to me like, by the way, Master's Touch is not as useful for Gunlance because shells can't crit, therefore Master's Touch ain't going to do anything for you. But it seems to me like Gunlance is trying, not Gunlance, Capcom is trying to push us towards Razor Sharp because I think that two of the Gunlance focused sets include Razor Sharp. In my opinion, this is a mistake. I kind of feel that Protective Polish is the better way to go, particularly because you have quite a few Gunlances that can reach Purple Sharpness, so this is going to increase your melee damage as well, so Protective Polish becomes much more important than Razor Sharpness. To top it off, it's like Bullet Barrage is not counted as one attack for Razor Sharpness, like each of the individual attacks will have to proc Razor Sharp. Like, I have, one of the Gunlance that I have has a decent amount of purple, like it's not like just 1 millimeter of purple, it's got like 3, 4... You know, it's got a decent chunk of purple, basically. One usage of Bullet Barrage with 3 Razor Sharp almost brought me down to white. So it's like, if you plan on using Bullet Barrage and you want to maintain your sharpness, my recommendation is get that Protective Polish. It is going to be worth it. As a matter of fact, in my current set that I'm running in Sunbreak, not only I have Protective Polish, I have Protective Polish and speed sharpening, obviously, because if you're running Protective Polish, you want speed sharpening. So Protective Polish, speed sharpening, and item prolonger. I'm running all 3. That's the level of disgustingness that I'm going for. I'm like addicted to sharpness, all right? And then finally, at the end, guard and guard up. These are less valuable, in my opinion. Obviously, depends on your experience with the weapon. But these are less valuable this time around because of Redirection. If you master Redirection, you don't have to guard nearly as much, and it makes the weapon much more powerful. So this is kind of like my thoughts on everything that the Gunlance has had and how you should be using it. And now, let's actually get practical and show you guys how I've been using the weapon. So I almost forgot to talk about this when I was done recording the video, so I'm sorry if this was an abrupt cut or something like that, but I need to tell you guys about Rampage decorations that are of significant importance to the Gunlance. So as you play through the game, you're going to be unlocking Rampage decorations, and these are actually some of the first ones that you're going to be unlocking, and there are these 4 that I particularly find very important. You have Anti-Dragon Jewel 2, Anti-Aerial Jewel 2, Anti-Aquatic Jewel 2, and Fanged Exploit Jewel 2. So all of these 4 all of these 4 Rampage decorations. These Rampage decorations, I've talked about these in a previous video. These are special decorations that you put in your weapons in a special slot that they have, which is a Rampage slot just for these specific decorations. And these 4 specifically are very important because these actually affect shelling damage. This was already the case back in Monster Hunter Rise. You guys might remember I told you guys about the Wyvern exploit skill, that there was a way to build the Rachna Kadaki Gunlance where it wouldn't get the usual skills that it got, and instead you could get Wyvern exploit. And, you know, that was much more powerful because it would increase the shelling damage against the wide type of monsters. And these do exactly that. So Wyvern exploit is like anything that's a wyvern. So as you guys can see, bird wyverns, flying wyverns, brute wyverns, piscine wyverns, fanged wyverns, as well as leviathans, right? Then you have the anti-aerial. This is pretty much anything that flies. Now, a lot of the wyverns also fly. So as you can see, flying wyverns right there, they also get affected, but it's like the aerial kind of does the same thing. I haven't actually looked up if there's any monster that flies that's not a wyvern. I've been trying to use these in Elder Dragons that fly. I'm not entirely sure if they work because I haven't really tested it extensively, sorry. But then we also have anti-aquatic Jewel. This is something that is going to affect, you know, piscine wyverns, which they're also affected by anti-dragon. But if you think of something like Hermitor, that's kind of like an aquatic creature that is not a wyvern. So that is affected by this. So keep that in mind. Then you have Fanged Exploit. This is going to be beasts like Urzuros, Rajang, that type of stuff. As for Elder Dragons, I haven't really done extensive testing when it comes to Elder Dragons and these things. But these 4, for anything that is not an Elder Dragon, you definitely want to be equipping at least one of these in your Gunlance. And this means that the Gunlances that have tier 2 Rampage slots are going to be much more valuable than Gunlances that only have tier 1. At least that's my opinion on it, but I just want to let you guys know. These do affect shelling damage, which means they are very important because there aren't a whole lot of things that affect shelling damage, as it turns out, right? So as you can see, we're looking at our skills right now. We got Agitator level 3. This is actually a bonus that comes because of one of my armor pieces. I didn't actually go after Agitator. But then we got Protective Polish 3, Guard 3. This comes with some of the pieces that also bring like artillery and other things. So this is kind of like a nice little bonus. We got Artillery 3, Evade Extender 3, Speed Sharpening 3, Item Prolonger 3. You don't necessarily need Item Prolonger. This is just me being super greedy. Wirebug Whisperer 3, Guard Up 2. You don't need this much Guard Up. This is just like, you know, this is a bit of a hodgepodge set that I have. It's not going to be my end-all be-all set. I'll show you guys the mixed set at the end of this video because I want people that don't know about the full roster of Sunbreak to not get spoiled about potential monsters that I have used in this set, right? Then we got Part Breaker 2, Redirection 2, and the rest of it is just a hodgepodge of skills that comes with the armor set that we got going here, right? So, then looking at our scrolls, you're looking at Blast, Dash, Quick, Reload, Wyrmstake, Cannon, Bullet, Barrage, and Guard's Edge on our red swap scroll. This is our Bullet Barrage spam setup. So the idea is if the monster is not fast enough, we're going to be using in this setup, like if the monster is so slow that I can consistently land Bullet Barrages, I'm going to stay in this mode pretty much non-stop. If the monster, however, starts moving a little bit faster, we're going to swap over to the blue scroll. And in here we got Blast, Dash, Quick, Reload, Erupting, Cannon, Ground Splitter, and Guard Edge. So the advantage here is that this is a faster playstyle using Ground Splitter for, you know, catching up to the monster and unloading Erupting Cannons on him, increasing our melee damage. This is also useful if you're trying to get like a tailed chop. With Gunlance, you're going to get that Erupting Cannon off. You're going to get, you know, the Ground Splitter. You're going to be able to position yourself in a way to try and go after tails. Gunlance is still not the easiest weapon to get tail chops, but I find it tremendously satisfying, and that is why I use this. Now, this is the loadout that I would use for both for both normal and long shelling. Wide shelling, I will use something completely different. I'll show you guys in a second here. But what would the playstyle be like? Well, for starters, you want to go ahead and sharpen your weapon because we got Protective Polish. And then the idea is the monster in a position where he can be bullet barraged? Well, guess he's getting bullet barraged. Then after the bullet barrage, you're going to dodge or, you know, just reload, get ready, and then go into full burst. And since we got long shelling, I'm going to go straight into Wyrmstake because the Wyrmstake is the most powerful in long shelling. And as you can see, Bullet Barrage is up again. Go for that. Boom, unload. Maybe if you're playing normal and your Gunlance happens to have exceedingly good, normal or long, and your Gunlance happens to have exceedingly good raw damage, you might consider the wide sweep before going into the Wyrmstake. That is going to be up to you, and also naturally depending on your openings as well. But 9 times out of 10, going for the Wyrmstake immediately after the full burst might be the way to go. Again, it all depends on your openings. But the second your bullet barrage is up, unload it on the monster. Unless, for some reason, you're like, oh man, but this monster's so fast, it's kind of hard to predict where he's going to be. That's when you swap to the blue scroll, and you're like, alright, in that case, we're going to go straight for Ground Splitter, into Erupting Cannon, and then we can shell immediately afterwards, like I said, to go into a full burst if we want to. But the cool thing is that with Erupting Cannon, like I said, I kind of feel like poke damage might have been a little bit buffed. You know, obviously we also have purple sharpness in this character, but you can go for pokes. Like, poke is a very good thing. When it comes to Gunlance and Sunbreak, I feel like pokes are really, really good. So if you know, if you're fighting a monster, he's very unpredictable, you're struggling to do full burst or anything like that, then just go straight for poke and like poke him until you figure out his moveset, figure out where your openings are to go to full burst, because obviously full burst at the end of the day is what you want to go for. But you know, keep Ground Splitter up, which is a more agile playstyle. It deals less damage than Bullet Barrage spam, but the advantage is when the opening does present itself, you can swap and Bullet Barrage, baby. Ba-boom! And that's pretty much how I roll when it comes to this particular playstyle. If your sharpness goes down a little bit, go ahead and you resharpen. It's a very quick sharpening in the build that I'm running. And boom. This is pretty much how I play the game. It's like, oh, Bullet Barrage? Okay, Bullet Barrage. Boom! It just does a ton of damage. Like, I was doing testing and stuff and trying to come up with stuff that would beat Bullet Barrage, and I couldn't find it. So it's like, if you want to sacrifice the damage for added mobility with the blue scroll playstyle, you can do that. But ultimately, if your monster is slow enough, this is what you want to be doing. Just like Bullet Barrage, that sucker to death. Now, let's talk about wide. Okay, so on wide, once again, we got Agitator, Protective Polish, Guard, Artillery, Evade, Extended Part Breaker, Speed, Sharpening, Item, Prolonger, Wirebug, Whisper, Guard, Upload, Shells, Redirection. Now, in here, I find that Guard is much more important than when it comes to long, because of course, you can always use the Redirection thing, which, you know, I didn't really show, but I've shown it to you guys throughout the rest of the video, how you do Redirection. Obviously, when a monster's about to hit you, you want to make sure that you pop those Redirections often to keep the Wirebugs off of cooldown so that you can do Bullet Barrage, right? But when it comes to wide shelling, the main difference is going to be like, hey, is the monster, you're going to be able to do a Bullet Barrage? Unload the Bullet Barrage. And you guys are like, wow, really? Even with wide? Yes, even with wide, the damage the Bullet Barrage does is so much that it is worth it for you to just like unload Bullet Barrage after Bullet Barrage. The difference is, because this allows you for a faster playstyle, I tend to go after Ground Splitter in this mode much more often, because usually I'll use wide when it's a smaller monster or something like that I can just like stick on it and go full wild with poke, shell, poke, and I only go after Bullet Barrages when there's an opening. But ultimately, you know, if you have the chance to spam Bullet Barrage, that is still what you want to do, because Bullet Barrage is still king damage from what I can tell, even in wide shelling. If you guys are like, Rurikhan, what about charged shells? I don't believe in charged shells, because like, look, charged shell does like 209 damage or something, and it takes about as long as me just doing this. Bang, bang. It's like, and this is, we're talking 200 damage if you pop Ground Splitter, of course. So it's like, the amount of time that it takes you to do a charged shell where you have to sit there, I can just go like bang, bang. I can even go again, Erupting Cannon, bang. You can shoot it 3 times. This is another cool little thing that wide shelling allows you to do with Erupting Cannon. Well, wide shelling and pretty much any other shelling style, but, you know, mostly for wide shelling. You can actually just go full shelling. You can go like bang, bang, Erupting Cannon, bang. And I think that even that is way better than charged shells, because you're just like, dude, I'll just unload. The biggest downside of that is that, as you can see, it's going to pull you away from the monster. So you're going to, you know, you can use the Ground Splitter to reposition. But ultimately, just keep in mind, on Sunbreak, at least for now, with the patch that I've played of this game, it's all about unloading that Bullet Barrage, baby. And that's pretty much it when it comes to my Gunlance guide for Sunbreak. Like I said, there's still a lot of stuff to learn with these weapons as more people begin using them in the game. This should kind of like help you get started, develop your own playstyle. Let me know if it helped in the comment section down below. Now I'm going to be sharing the actual mixed sets, so if you don't want to see the mixed sets, if you don't want to see monster names. I don't think that any of these monsters is particularly spoilery. I think they've all been pretty much revealed. I'm not using anything from a monster that wasn't revealed, but still I understand that some people are sensitive about that, so feel free to exit out of the video. I would just ask that if this helped you in any way, hit the like button, subscribe, bell notification icon, all of that jazz. And yeah, that's 3, 2, 1. Spoilers incoming your way. Let's actually go into managed equipment, set decorations. You can see we got Roar the Canine here. This is the guild tree. This is the one of the best, at least, long shelling gunlance that I've found so far. Doesn't necessarily mean that it is the best, because like I said, there's still monsters that I haven't seen. There are still gunlances whose final form I haven't unlocked yet. This is just the one that I'm using right now. Roar the Canine, long shelling level 8. It's got a tier 2 Rampage slot that allows me to slot in for the anti-dragon stuff, anti-arrow, fanged exploit. These are all extremely good for gunlance. As a matter of fact, I'll probably need to add a little addendum to the video before the cutoff where I talk about these. But anyway, then we have Juratotus helmet. The reasoning behind that, it's got evade extender, so that's real good. Lunagaron mail, mostly because it's got redirection. Although you might be able to do a better mix set. This is just something that I did, and I never really went back to change it because it also has good slots and stuff like that. I was like, this kind of works. Then we got Espina's Van Braces to get some protective polish in there. We put a shield jewel in this one to get just a little bit of guard up, but I kind of want to replace a lot of this gear, so don't take this to be gospel. We got Basel Coil, which is one of the best possible value items when it comes for gunlancing, at least that I've found so far. I haven't really seen Master Arlo's armor, so there might be something better there. We got Basel Greaves that come in with 2 artillery, 1 guard, and 1 agitator, and a tier 3 slot that is perfect to land that redirection. And we have my charm that is just friggin' god tier. Comes in with 2 Wirebug Whispers and 3 Wirebug Whisper, 2 Park Breaker, and 2 tier 2 slots that I'm actually using for speed sharpening right now. But, you know, you gotta make do with what you gotta make do. And this is the mixed set that I have for long. Let me swap over to my mixed set for normal, which is pretty much the same thing. It's the same thing. The only difference is that I'm using the Scissor Cannon, which is the Armator Gunlance. There's another normal level 8 shelling that might even be a little bit better than this one. I was using this one because I was also testing out the effects of something like Element Bane, which increases damage based on the element of your weapon. I was seeing if that affected shelling in any way, and it doesn't, which is a damn shame. But, you know, I still ended up just keeping this one as my normal shelling gunlance. I don't really use it, to be honest. Because everything that normal shelling does, long shelling can kind of do a little bit better, with the exception of full burst. But even then, I kind of feel that long shelling is just better overall. But the rest of it is, everything's pretty much the same. It's the same build. It's the same exact thing. Because even the same like skills and switch skills and stuff like that, so it's not really a big deal. And then finally for the wide, it's the same build as well. I've been using the same build on all of them. It's just a couple of things change in terms of skills and stuff like that. We actually go for full part breaker on this one. Because this Gunlance has a couple of more, it has a couple of more slots. We also go for 1 KO jewel, so that you get a little bit more punch on your KO. But everything else is pretty much the same as well. So, you know, you still have level 3 sharpening, all of that stuff. These are not built for multiplayer. I don't have Brace. I'm not sure how Brace is going to screw me over once I get into multiplayer. Because I don't know how much I'll be affected with the current playstyle that I'm doing with the Gunlance, stuff like that. I'll have to test that stuff out. And like I said, I'm going to min-max these sets a little bit better. This is just to show you guys what we're working with here. But yeah, these are the sets. I'm using the Crunchy Corn Popper as the wide shelling level 8. I think that there are more. Actually, there's at least another one that is wide shelling level 8, but it had like negative affinity, so I didn't really want it to use that one. But I'm looking forward to unlocking more Gunlances and see other level 8 shellings to see the type of stuff that I can do. But for now, these are the mixed sets that we are working with. Once again, if you guys enjoyed this video, hit it up with a like. Let me know what you guys think about it, and I will be trying to do addendums if newer information becomes available, if more players discover new playstyles. There's also going to be a link to CaosSlayer's YouTube, because CaosSlayer is one of the main reasons why I started looking into Redirection, because he was analyzing that stuff, as I mentioned in the video. So, you know, check him out. He does a lot of Gunlance stuff as well. And that's going to be it for this video. Like button, subscribe, bell notification icon, all that jazz, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay strong, stay safe, peace out.